nothing. I know that Jesus is Lord. I know that I'm a sinner. Other than that, I don't know anything. I got out of my bed, it's about 3:30 in the morning, went into my bathroom, fell down on the floor, and gave my life to Jesus Christ, asked him to forgive me for my sins.
Atheist becomes a Christian after reading one of the most profound books ever, besides the Bible, obviously. And I think this is a massive reason why so many people actually become an atheist in the first place is this guy's story. So let's get into it, and I can't wait to watch it with you all.
You actually said Christianity was a delusion and a plague upon humanity. Talk to us about that. What was your life like before you met Christ? How did you see Christianity in that way?
Yeah, so it really kind of flows out of, I think, just the narrative of my life. So I grew up going to a church really a handful of times. And that was kind of my whole experience of church. So it wasn't a particularly relevant part of my life. But I did believe that there was a God.
Yeah.
And the Bible teaches that we all have eternity in our hearts, right? So I had a sense that there was a God. I didn't know what that meant. And my grandparents bought me this little framed picture that I ended up putting up on the wall when I was very young. And it said, "With God, all things are possible." So that was kind of my framework for God. God was this God who existed and he could do anything. And I think the way that I defined that was he would kind of do anything that I wanted, right? That was kind of my framework.
Like a genie God.
Exactly, exactly, like a vending machine kind of God.
Yes, that's right.
So I was in my teens. I was in a relationship with a girl for a few years, and right as she went off to university and I stayed back, she broke up with me, and I was absolutely devastated. And in my grief, in my pain, and this is, at that point, the most pain I'd ever experienced, I remember looking at that sign on the wall that said, "With God, all things are possible." And I actually audibly said, "We're done."
Wow.
And I took that off the wall, and that was the moment where I then decided I was an atheist. Because if there was a God, how could he have possibly allowed this to happen in my life?
Yeah, why would he cause suffering? Why would he cause pain?
Exactly.
Yeah, if all things were possible through him.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big flaw with some of people who believe in God, and they believe that everything that they do, God's for us. He's gonna bless it because I prayed and asked God to do this. But that's not in reality. God says when you are in the will of God, all these things will be added unto you. When you do the will of God, everything you ask for will be given. But you have to be in the will of God first. If you're not in the will of God, you don't know what's best for you. And when bad things happen, you think that God's a liar now. But that's not the truth. God's not a genie in the bottle. God is not a genie in a bottle just waiting for you to wish every command.
So there wasn't a lot of thought that went into it other than I don't want any part of a God that would allow this to take place in my life. I'm done. So again, Romans talks about how we tend to suppress the truth, So that's what I did. So it was then really a whole mindset, a whole ideology that I adopted from the position that I had in life. That was my narrative. This pain happened. Therefore, because pain happened, there must not be a God. Therefore, all of Christianity, all of religion, must be this complete delusion.
Yeah, okay.
And so that really was my mindset.
Yeah. So because of that one experience that you had, a significant experience that I know in your story was then, what that looked like at the end of high school and into your college, university years, there's just this constant tension that you had in wrestling with that concept, right? Wrestling with this sense that, okay, is there a God? Does he exist? And if so, then why would he do that? And in a sense, you kind of threw it all out.
Yes.
As you threw that out, what then did your life look like? Because there was a point when Jesus met you, right? And he turned, but what was right before he met you? What was happening in your life that, that was kind of the bed, the seed bed before there was this transformation in you?
Yeah. So early on, so we're talking grade 7.
Yeah.
That's when I was first introduced to drugs.
Yeah.
And drinking, and it didn't take long before this became a very important part of my life. So it went from going to school and doing drugs during break, during lunch, after school, maybe a couple times a week, to maybe every other day, to almost then every day. And that started as early as grade 7, grade 8. And then, believe it or not, into high school, things got even worse. And then into college, and then university, things got even worse. And so, really, what my life became was wake up in the morning, get high, try to sober up enough to function enough to go to class. Come home from school, get high, try to sober up enough to go to work. And I worked as a bartender. And that whole environment was very much a party scene. So go to work and then drink and get high again and then hit repeat the next day.
Wow.
So it was a constant pursuit of something that would maybe in a sense kind of put my pain on hold. I was self-medicating. I was just trying to find something that would give me some kind of comfort, something that would give me some kind of pleasure, something that gave me even some kind of purpose. I mean, it really became the center of my life, was just getting access to the drugs that I wanted, engaging in the drugs that I wanted, hanging out with the people that thought likewise. But there was absolute no joy. There was no peace. There was just increasing misery. And I can remember in my early 20s, I'm in grad school, again, just by the grace of God, somehow getting into grad school and functioning within grad school. But at the same time, I can remember being in my apartment, laying down like just on the floor in such a depressed state, and just I have nothing to live for. And I can remember just laying there in absolute despair with no answers. And nothing. And it was then that everything started to change.
Yeah. I love Pascal. Most of us think about him as a mathematician, but he said something very...
But yeah, that's so true. So many people think that they can find what they've been looking for in this world. Everything, they look for it in everything. In relationships, in money, in drugs, in possessions. None of it satisfies, because once you get it, you get tired of it. But Jesus always stays the same.
Profound. He said that there's a God-shaped hole in every single one of our hearts. And in your story, Nathan, you're describing all the ways that you were trying to fill that God-shaped hole. But then you met Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah. Talk to us about that.
Yes. So we all have a story, right?
Yeah.
We all have a story. So in this bar and where I worked, I met this girl.
Yeah.
And so she was working in the kitchen. She decided she wanted to come out and work on the bar. So I ended up training her. Her father's a pastor. And she had left the church. She had turned her back on faith and just ran headlong into the world. And so she was looking for the guy who was least like her father, and she found him. I'm that guy.
Wow.
And so we ended up dating very, very quickly, ended up moving in together very, very quickly. And before we knew it, she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And so wrestling through that, I remember the first time I ever met her father. Her father is a big man, so he's 6'6", probably 250, 270, big guy, works out.
Yeah.
And so they came over and they sat down in my little apartment, and for some reason, because no one else wanted to broach the subject, I was then given the job of telling him what the situation was. So he sits down, and I was thinking, and
wild.
I just got to do this Band-Aid thing, and he's a pastor. I mean, and who doesn't like children? This is obviously probably going to go well, eventually. So I remember sitting down, and I said, okay, my first words to my future father-in-law, your daughter's pregnant. And he looked at me, and he just went gray. And then my second words to my future father-in-law ever was, it doesn't look like you're taking this very well. And in retrospect, I didn't know how well he was taking it because he wanted to reach across and separate my head from my body at that point.
Wow.
But from that point, we started to engage with them. You know, there was a period where there wasn't much engagement, but we started to engage with them. And every once in a while, we would go up and visit them, and I would be not dragged along, but I'd politely go to church. And I would be the guy in the front row, and arms crossed, the worship is happening, everyone around me is singing and hands up in the air, and I'm just like, this is crazy. And this is all it did was just kind of fuel in me even more of a rebellion, more of a I'm putting my stake in the ground here, built up the atheist library.
Wow. And it makes you wonder, why in the world do people get so defensive? It's like they have to hold on to their beliefs. It's like they have to hold on to everything that they've been taught their whole entire life. I mean, I get it. It's difficult to admit that you're wrong and admit that maybe your viewpoints aren't correct. Maybe there is a God. Maybe there is someone who loves you, who died on the cross for your sins so that you could be saved.
A little bit more, did some more research, and just like this is insanity. And so over the course of that time, although I'd be sitting in church with arms crossed, when the preaching was taking place, there was an audience with my heart. And that's the opposite of what I wanted, but I was listening, and something was going on. And as I got to know my father-in-law, my wife and I got married. As I got to know my father-in-law, I got to see that he's a normal person. He's not what I thought a Christian was. And one day he handed me this book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and because he had established enough of a relationship with me, like he had built a relational bridge into my life, and then he brought the gospel over it.
Yeah.
He handed me this book, and I had no intention of reading it, but I took it. And I said, "Oh, thank you," politely took it.
Wow.
And then it sat on my night table for months and months and months. And then one night I couldn't sleep, and it was about 11:30. Opened my eyes, saw this book sitting there, and I thought, "Oh, what's the harm in opening it up?" So I opened it up. I started reading it. And I was instantly engaged. And I got about halfway through this book, and the scales fell off my eyes. And I became absolutely convinced in a moment that Jesus Christ is exactly who he says he is. And in that moment, all I knew is that I know nothing. I know that Jesus is Lord. I know that I'm a sinner. Other than that, I don't know anything. I got out of my bed. It's about 3:30 in the morning, went into my bathroom, fell down on the floor, and gave my life to Jesus Christ, asked him to forgive me for my sins.
Wow.
And my wife woke up the next morning to an entirely different person. And in some
Wow. Yeah, you never know what seed you will plant in someone's life. You never know if that person that you thought will never receive Jesus, never give their life to Christ, do. And that's amazing. So don't lose hope. Keep on spreading the gospel. Keep on sharing the love of Jesus. And don't be afraid, because that's truly, truly amazing. Anyway, guys, I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. I encourage you to share the gospel with so many people. And if you never decided to follow Jesus, I encourage you to do that today. In the description below, you can click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I encourage you to do that today, guys. And always remember, Jesus loves you.